Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Tuesday Beginner Series. As I mentioned in my last video, I think the place for us to go next is to talk about the different methods of coloring. So we've looked at how to stamp images, and you have seen me bad English. You have seen me do some coloring using our Stampin' Blends, and we'll go into that in even more detail tonight. But there are just a multitude of different ways and mediums that you can use to add color to your stamped images. Now, some stamped images already are filled in for you, so you just pick the ink color you want and ink up your stamp and stamp it down, and voila, you have a colored image. But many of them, like this one we're going to be using tonight, are outline images. And that gives you the freedom to really express yourself by the different colors and the different coloring mediums that you use in your work. So I have several things laid out here. And what you'll see is I have our ink pads. I have our blends, and you've not seen me use our watercolor pencils. So that's a brand new medium that we're going to be using. And we've used our ink pads to ink up our images, but I'm actually going to show you how you can get a little bit of the ink in actually the bottom of your ink pad, add some water, and with your aqua painter, your water brush, you can actually use the ink right from the ink pad to color in your images. So I think we're going to have some fun with tonight's session. At the end of it, hopefully, if I'm not too long-winded, we'll actually make a card. I do have the elements cut out for us to make a card using what we're going to be doing. I went ahead and stamped in the main floral image from our petal palette stamp set. And this one carried over into the upcoming new catalog, so I'm very happy about that. But we're using this image right here. Lovely roses. Perfect time of year for that. I went ahead and stamped in one of them using our smoky slate ink pad. Now, I've heard some people say, well, can you watercolor if you're using our dye inks? And the answer is, with my smoky slate, as long as I let it dry, I don't have a problem at all. So just make sure. You might want to test if you're going to be using different colored inks for your outline. Just test by stamping on a scratch piece of paper, let it dry, and then take a little bit of ink and water and try to go ahead and watercolor. If it smudges, then you know that that's not a good ink for you to use. But the smoky slate, I've had absolutely no problems with. I've also not had problems with Memento Tuxedo Black. All right, we're going to be using the same two colors for all of our coloring, no matter which of the mediums that we use. So for our ink pads, our Stampin' Blends, and our watercolor pencils, we're using Calypso Coral. Now, in the blends and the watercolor pencils, I'm using Old Olive. I can't find my Old Olive ink pad. I'm going to substitute Pear Pizzazz, which is a close cousin of it, so I think it will look just fine. Let me move these out of the way, and we'll take them one by one so as not to be confusing. And first, let's talk about watercoloring. So you'll need watercolor pencils, and I have here one of our water brushes or aqua painters. And it's simply filled with water in the barrel. It has a nice brush tip, and you squeeze just a little bit. Don't want too much. Make sure that your brush is wet, but not overflowing. And then I like very sharp pencils because that gives me more control. all I'm going to do is go in and I'm going to work in small sections. Anytime you're watercoloring, especially if you're watercoloring on regular cardstock tends not to take water very well. It will pill up if you use too much water. I'm going to be very sparing with my water, so I felt comfortable showing it to you on the Whisper White cardstock. All I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a petal, and I'm just going to lay down some color. And I'm not going to color the entire petal. And that's because when I hit this with some water, I can pull that color out towards the edges. So I've laid down color just right there, and starting at the colored area, I'm just going to gently pull that color out. And if you look at that, let me see if I can pull it up here. You can see that it's darker where I laid down the color, and I made it lighter by pulling it out. And that's all there is to using your watercolor pencils. So I can go back in and I'll do another one. And I actually like when I'm working with natural things such as roses or leaves, they have striations in the petal or in the leaves. So I actually, instead of going in a circular motion, I will do little quick lines and then gently pull the color out by starting where I laid down color and then pulling it out to the edges. And as you can see, it really goes fairly quickly. Now, what say, maybe I know this is darker than my outer petals, just lay more color down. Press a little harder on your pencil or go back in twice with your color and then add your water. Let me pick a bigger petal so you can see that better. So I'm going to lay down my color, and I'm really kind of pressing hard on my pencil. I want to make sure I get some good pigment going there. Now I can come in with my aqua painter here, my water brush, and just pull that color out. So really very, very simple. Now I want to show you, remember I was telling you that you have to be very careful not to lay down too much water or your paper will pill. And I've been really careful, so I haven't gotten much pilling here. But if I turn this over, can you see the back? See where it's all kind of bubbled down? So you have to be very, very careful if you're using your watercolor pencils. But it certainly can be done using your cardstock, your Whisper White cardstock. If you have watercolor paper, definitely I would recommend using that because you can go back and add layers. If I wanted to lay down more color in one of these petals, it would be difficult for me to do that on the Whisper White because I run the risk of pilling the paper. Hi, Amy. Hello, Patricia. Welcome, ladies. Glad that you could join. All right, so any questions about going in and watercoloring? All right, I'm not going to do that full image just because I like to go back and add a lot of depth with different layers. So we're going to move on to the next one. That would just, we'd be here all night if you let me watercolor this image. So I'm going to open up my smoky slate using that same stamp. I can ink it up and I'll stamp it again. And I will be using one of these for the card, but I'm going to die cut out the image. And you know what, while I'm at it, let's do a third one because we have two other mediums that we're going to use. So I'll just get all that stamping out of the way. All right, now I can close this up. Let's go ahead and use the blends next. And I absolutely love the blends. I'm so excited with all the new colors that are going to be coming out this year in the blends. That gives us a lot more versatility. But I found that I have really been using my Calypso Coral and my Old Olive a lot. So I'll probably need to get replacements for those. I'm going to turn this around, make this easier. And we have in the blends a light and a dark for each of our colors. This makes getting color variation and gradation easy, because I can start with one color and move on to the next. And for really good blending, I like to start out with my lighter color first, come back in and hit the darker areas with the dark color, and then blend them out using the light color again. Let me show you what I mean. Now there are two tips. We have a nib for your fine detail work, and we have a brush. And I like to start with my brush because I can lay down some good color. So I'll just pick a leaf and I'm just going to scrub in the color. Not really paying attention to worrying about shadows or anything right now. I just want to fill this in with some color. So there we go. Now I'm going to come in with my Old Olive Dark, and because these leaves are relatively big, I can use my brush end. And what I'm going to do is, this stamp is great, stamp set's great because it does lay in areas where you would naturally have shadow. I'm just going to kind of follow that and add a few of my own. So down the center, and then these veins. I'll put a little more down at the corners or at the bottom where it meets the stem. So I've got my dark color. I'll pull that up so you can see it. Doesn't really blend really well. Pretty easy to tell the demarcation lines. No worries, just come in with the light color again and blend in from the dark area out to the light area. And that's how you get those nice values and the depth from the shading. So really, really easy. Let's do that one more time. Working with the blends is so fast that I find I can really get a lot of coloring done in just a little bit of time. Since we only have one more set of leaves, we'll just knock those out while we're here. Again, I'm going to come in with my darker color, and wherever there's veining or a crinkle in the leaf where I might have a little more shadow, I'll just go ahead and lay down some color there. Then coming back with my light, blending that in. And you don't have to recolor the whole image with the light, just where the dark and the light meet. And there we go. So that quickly, we colored in our leaves. I'm going to use the same principle for doing my flowers. I have the light calypso coral and the dark calypso coral. Now for this, I have some really small petals in the center, and I think I'm going to go ahead and just start with my dark there, because those would be dark anyway. Don't really have to worry about doing too much blending there. So I'll just get those laid in first. Coming to my brush point for my light calypso coral, now I'm going to go in, and I can, whereas with watercoloring I was just kind of doing one petal at a time, I can knock out one section at a time. I'm not going to do a huge area. I won't do the whole flower though, because I do want to make sure that I can blend it back out without having the lines stay. And here what I'm doing, if you notice, I'm just going in, and where it's darker, where the petal is laying against another petal, that's where I'm making it dark. So right here and right here. I do want a little bit of darkness even on the ones that are standing out front. Just going to pull in a few lines here, and you really can be as detailed as you want with this. Now I'm going to come back with the light and blend it. I'm not pushing the color all the way out to the end or to the very edge of the petal for two reasons. That's normally where the light would hit, so a little bit of highlight on the very tips of the petals is natural, but also I want to make sure that I don't get any bleed over. that my ink doesn't run outside of the stamped image. Now I'll just finish this. And you can see how very quickly this goes. I'm using the brush, the nib end of the dark Calypso Coral just to give myself a little more control. The areas that I'm shading are naturally going to be less than the highlighted areas. Unless you're working with a bud, in which case you might have a lot of darker areas. And I'll just come in and blend those out. After it's all dry, if you want to go back and hit a few of the dark areas again, you certainly can. But very easy to get dark and light shades that way. Let's just go ahead and finish this up while we're at it. I'm going to be brave and do the whole thing, but I'm moving pretty quickly, so I'm not going to let a lot of time elapse before I hit it with my blending again. So once again, just looking at where the petals overlay is going to be darker. Sometimes that's a little hard to see, but I can tell right here and right here. I've got a petal overlay right here. Now I'm going to go in and just do some flicking motions to get a little bit of striation on my petals. And it would be dark right there, so get a little bit of striation here. As you can see, man, I can go to town on this and really have fun. And now I'll come in and I'm just blending from where just before the dark starts to just beyond it where it meets the light. Making sure, and I'm working in circular motions when I'm going back and doing my blending. That seems to blend things the best. All right. We only have one more to do. Oops. It's easy to get them confused because you start with light, go to dark, end with light, and then you switch to another flower and think you need to switch to light, but you already have it in your hand. So until you're comfortable with that, be sure and just look. It tells you the color right here on the side. So make sure that you are indeed starting out with your light color. Now come in with my dark. And this one's going to be a lot easier to do because the petals are much larger. So I have an overlay right here. There would naturally be shadow. And then right here I have some. And this back here would be darker. So just go in and have fun with it. And now I can start with my little striations just to make it look like it's darker towards the center and lighter towards the tip of my flower. You don't have to be precise, just go in and have some fun with it. Come back with your light and blend it out. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. So I'll pull that up so you can see it just like that. Okay, I did forget to do one set of leaves, so let me go back in real fast and just knock those out. lighten it up by blending. And there you have it. So in pretty short time, we've gone ahead and colored in that whole stamped image. And like I said, you can spend a lot of time. You can let this dry. You can go back and, for instance, this flower, oops, right here is a little bit lighter than the other two. So if I wanted to darken up more, I could just go back and hit it again with the light and dark and blend it out. That's working with your blends. A lot of fun. Any questions about that? All right, so we've talked about watercolors. We've worked with our blends. Now I want to get to actually using your ink from your ink pads to do your coloring. And what I'll do is I'm going to squeeze. It's easier to squeeze from the bottom. If I squeeze before I open, it puts ink in the well here. And I can use that ink to go in and to work with my stamped image. I'll do the same with my green. So I'm just squeezing the back. Then I'll open it up. And again, I have a nice well of color. I'm going to use my water pen for this. I believe you also can use your blender pen if you want a different look. But what I'm going to do is just squeeze a few drops, and I'm not going to put it in the center of the ink here. I'm going to squeeze my drops off to the side, because that way I can control the strength of the color. Now again, because we're working with water, I don't want to go back in and do this a whole bunch of times, or I will cause pilling. But once I have my brush loaded up with the color I want, and you can see I've got dark color, I've got light color, just by the amount of water. I come in here and just lay down color on my flowers. And if you find that you've got too much water on your brush, use a paper towel. And I'll bet I don't have one in here. Oh, yes, I do. Let me grab it really quick, because it's important for you to control the amount of water that is on your brush. Two reasons. Number one, it will pill, but also number two, it will bleed outside the lines. Now, if I want darker color, so I've laid in some nice light color, I can go, now that I've wiped my brush off, I can pick up some of that darker color and come back in here and lay that down as well. It's very easy for me to go from the light to the dark, but you do need to let the layer dry before you try to go back in and hit it with the dark, so that you don't get too much of a washout. Let me show you what I mean. So if I've got a really wet or soupy and I come in with the dark, it's just going to run. So it doesn't really give me much color. If I let that dry just a little bit, and that one's just about done, I think, I can pick up some of the darker color and come in here, and you can see that now it allows me to keep that value or shade much better. If it's too dark, I just come back to my lighter color and blend it out. This is another coloring medium that goes really fairly quickly, the more comfortable you become with it. I haven't done a lot of painting with or coloring with my actual ink pads themselves, so I tend to take it just a little bit slower. It takes me a little bit longer, and as you can see, this has much more of a watercolor effect, even more so than my watercolor pencils did. So if you don't have the right color of watercolor pencils, or perhaps you're just starting out and you have not yet gotten our watercolor pencils, you still can get much the same look by going in and squeezing a little bit of ink into the well of your ink pad, using a few drops of water and coloring that way. So I'm going to let that one dry while I go on to the next one. And here you can see I'm just laying in a bunch of the light color. Because with this, when you hit it with the water again, it's going to reactivate, allowing you to put that darker color down and have it blend in. So let me dry this off a little bit, come back into my darker color, and I'll come down to this one and just lay in some color, blending it as much or as little as I want. Come back in and pick up more color if you need to. And now I can move on to my top one. And again, I'm just trying to pay attention to where the darker areas would be, where those petals cross over one another or on top of one another, and then making sure I get a little bit of color coming from the base of the petal up to the top. To me, that looks the most natural. You can color it however you like, though. That's the beauty of this. Okay, so a much softer appearance using the inks, because I really went in and used quite a bit of water to make that lighter color. So what happens if you get too much water in your well and you can't get any darker color? Pretty easy. You just go in and wipe it all out and start over again. You don't have to worry about getting water on your ink pad because your ink pad sits in the very top. So I'll squeeze some more color down. Oops, turn it the right way. And now making sure that my brush is fairly dry. Not too dry, but fairly dry. It will always have some water in it. Now I can come back in and I can add dark shades wherever I want. If I get it too dark, I just hit it with a little bit of the water. Very therapeutic and relaxing. And as you can see, I can get some really dark colors going here. But if it's too dark, I can come in and push that color back down just with the moisture in my brush. I'm thinking I like that. A little bit of a darker touch to it, much better. And even though this one is dry, I can come back and hit it as well. Just blending it out. All right, so there we have it. To clean off your brush, just squeeze it a little bit. And when there's no more color on your paper towel, then you know that it's done. We'll come in with the Pear Pizzazz now. And again, I'm going to squeeze just a few drops. Getting the color that I want. Come in and do my leaves. I'm going to use a lighter color first, to lay in that base, and then I'll come back with a darker color. And that's a nice thing. The fact that I can start out really light and lay the color over it. But again, just make sure you don't have too much water or you don't come back too many times, because you don't want to get that pilling. So far, we're doing pretty good here. All right, so I've got those leaves laid in. Now I'll come hit it with a little bit of the darker. Paying attention to where my veins are and where there might be some natural shadows. It starts to lighten up pretty fast once you're using it, so you will find yourself dipping it back in the well for more color. It's really dark here, so I'm going to go ahead and let that. Get a little more water on that. There we go. That's the color I want. So you can go back in and change the color by adding a little more of the ink to the water. All right, and I think I'm pretty happy with that. It will dry lighter than what it originally looks like. So do let it dry, and if you decide you want more color, put more color in. You don't have to wipe out the lid of your ink pad, but if there's quite a bit of water in it, I do like to tap that excess water out just to keep it nice and neat. All right, those were the 3 different methods that I wanted to show you. So we started out using watercolor pencils for this one. We used the ink in our ink pads and water for the second one, and then we used our blends for the third one. Same color values, just different coloring mediums. Okay, what do you say we take and put 1 or 2 of these into a card? That'd be fun, right? How are we doing on time? Not too bad. What I'm going to do is I'm going to die cut out a couple of these. I already have my card bases prepped, and we'll just go in and make a quick card. I'm going to start with the second one, and this die is from Petal Palette, so it matches my stamped image. I'm going to lay that in my Big Shot, and you guys have seen me use the Big Shot before, so I'm not going to bring it into the camera frame. And I'm just going to cut this out. All right, so that's the one that we did using the stamp pads and water. I think I'll also cut out the one we did with the blends, just so we have a good comparison. Besides, I've colored those images, I might as well use them, right? All right. So there's the one we did with the blends. Sometimes it's easier to see the difference when they're side by side like that without a lot of white between them. Okay. I cut card bases from Old Olive and Calypso Coral. And then we have our design panel background for each. And then I went ahead and cut 2 of the stitch shape squares, the largest one. And then those are both out of Whisper White. And then I cut 2 of the layering squares out of the largest one in Designer Series paper. This is from our delightful Daisy Retiring designer series paper. And I love the backs. Old Olive Calypso Coral. What could be more perfect? So we'll use, I think we'll use, yep, that on that and this on this. And then what we'll do is we'll take our stamped image and let's see, I think I'll put that on there. And so I put the watercolor one with the Calypso Coral card base and matte because it's softer. And I think that it goes well keeping kind of a monotone combination. It helps bring out the colors in that. So my blends one, which is stronger, I feel will look best on the Old Olive. I also die cut a couple of vellum leaf branches from the same petal palette set. Makes such a nice accent on a card. And did you know you also can color your vellum? So if I turn this over and I'll pull out my light Old Olive and let's see if I have a piece of scrap paper somewhere. Nope, well, I'll just do this. Here we go. I always keep scrap paper underneath, but very easy to color your vellum. And I do it on the back side because it just gives it a nice soft look. So I'll do a little bit of this. I'm not going to do a bunch because not all of it is going to be showing on our card. Just the uppermost portion. So I'll color that in. Really easy to do. And that will also help bring some additional color. And look at how pretty that is. I think I need to do this one other branch here because it will show. And we'll see if we need to do it for the other card or not. But I think that's all we're going to need. So let's bring everything back into the picture. And look at how pretty that is. We also need a sentiment. So I'm going to pull out from the same stamp set, Life is So Much Better With You in It. I think that is just such a pretty, pretty sentiment. Well, let me get my block here. And we'll go ahead, mount it on there. Hopefully I can make sure I get it on there straight. I think I'll use the same, do I want to use, I think I will use Smoky Slate. I really like the softness that Smoky Slate gives to sentiments. So I guess before I stamp it, I need to have it in front of me. Okay, so we'll get that straight. I'm going to do it down here in the bottom left corner. Hopefully I get this straight. Pretty good. And let me show you why I did that. What I'm going to do is glue these together. And glue those together. I'm actually going to have my flowers propped up on dimensionals, blowing off the upper right. So that's why I wanted it in the bottom left. Now we can go ahead and glue all of this together. It's going to be so pretty. And I'm using my multi-purpose liquid glue, which gives me, as you know, a little extra wiggle room. I might as well glue this one down as well. And this is going on my card base, so I want to make sure that I have it opening the right way. There we go. Now I just have to decide about my leafy branch. Do I want it coming off the card like this and then have that? Or do I actually want it kind of behind the sentiment panel and then have that? I think I like it behind. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I'm actually going to use glue dots for this rather than trying to use my liquid glue, which I would get everywhere, I can assure you. Glue dots are just an easy way to attach things that are going to be behind something else, because even though the stickiness comes through, you're putting something on top of it, so it really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to put a couple. Put one there, and let's put one right there. And then figure out, I want it a little more towards the top, so that looks about right to me there. Now I can glue this down. I could have propped this up on dimensionals, but since I'm going to be having this up on dimensionals, it makes it easier to mail it if I don't have 2 layers of dimensionals. So I will glue this one down flat. And I'm not putting it in the very center. I'm dropping it down just a tad. Because remember, we're going to have our flowers coming off the upper portion. Plus, we also have our leafy branches. And I may need to put another glue dot there, but we'll see what happens. All right, so my flowers I said I was going to put up on dimensionals. Pull some of those in. And you can have it go like this. You can have it go like this. So however feels comfortable to you. I kind of like it. I think, let's see, like that. So I'll put a few dimensionals on the back. Just making sure I have good contact. Now remember that some of it's going to be hanging off, so I need to make sure I don't have a dimensional up where it's going to hang off. So I need one more right here. And then I can peel off my backings. Position it right where I want it. I think I'll do it right like that. And there's our card. Since the other one's going to be just the same, to save time, because we're already 40 minutes into this, I will just make that one off camera, and I'll go ahead and put a picture of it up on my Facebook page. But it'll go together exactly the same way as that one did. I'm even going to color the vellum leaves just like I did this one, because I like the softness of that. Helps break up the white in the panel up here. And like I said, I probably will put one more mini glue dot there to hold it. But just do an inside panel with the sentiment, and you're ready to send it. You can embellish it if you like, with rhinestones, pearls. I may do that with the one colored with the blend, since the colors are bolder, but because this is so soft, I think I'll just let the colors speak for themselves. All right, so that is all about the coloring that I wanted to show you, at least for our initial foray into it. We haven't talked about brushos yet, so perhaps we'll do that on next Tuesday night and continue our coloring series then. We can also talk about color blending using sponge daubers. Maybe we'll do a pretty sunset sky. That's always fun to do with sponge daubers. So next Tuesday, we'll continue on delving into the world of color. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining me tonight. I hope you have a great rest of the week. If you need any supplies, remember, you can purchase them on my blog, cardsbywinnie.wordpress.com. Good night, everybody.